Hey everyone, this is Mike Verinder with Modern Software. We are continuing our series on autonomous SDLC. Today, we are going to dive in a little bit from a test product perspective of autonomous SDLC. So I'm here with Gal. Gal is one of the founders at Checksum. AI, and he's going to share a little bit of his perspective from a test product perspective on autonomous SDLC and where that may be going and what his viewpoints are on that. Hey, Gal, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
It's good to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us today. Let's start off. Why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about Checksum and what you guys do?
Yeah, so uh, shortly about myself, I worked in tech in the last 10 years. I worked at big companies like Google, as well as a CTO of small startups, until we came to co-found Checksum. And Checksum, in the short version, is that we generate end-to-end tests using AI. So for those who are not familiar, end-to-end tests are tests, at least from the Checksum perspective, tests that literally open up a browser, go to our application, to our customer's application, and click on buttons to make sure everything is working end-to-end. Front end communicates with the backend, database, everything. So that's what Checksum does in short. Our goal is to completely automate the process. So when you use Checksum, we don't just provide some code that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. We detect the different cases, the different test cases that customers need to generate. We generate the tests themselves, and we provide tests in open source products, in open source frameworks, Playwright specifically, Playwright and Cypress, and we automatically maintain the test. So essentially, we're trying to provide a full service to our customers so they don't need to think about end-to-end tests except actually running them.
Okay, cool. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like you have a number of AI solutions on top of a web-based UI automation. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a system of AI models that the sole purpose of the system is to generate and maintain a full end-to-end testing suite with very little input from the customer side, at least very little input required. Our customers can provide more input if they want to see specific tests. But within that, when we provide the tests, we provide them with Playwright. It's an open source framework backed by Microsoft. So essentially, it's like having an extension to your team. It's like having more engineers on your team that just sit down and write tests all day. When you run the tests, at the end of the day, it's Playwright, not Checksum.
Yeah, Playwright's an amazing tool. It works really well. It's competed a lot lately against Selenium, which is a big part of my audience. But they're doing really well. They've got a great tool, and it's a great tool to partner with, to be quite frank. So awesome, man.
It's on the rise, so we do find a lot of people want to migrate to Playwright, and using AI to do the migration process is one of the use cases we see from the market.
Does Checksum help that out, or with that migration, or do you have to do a third party vendor or something to do that?
No, we do the migration. So at the end of the day, our model writes code,
Mhm.
and this means that we can handle migrations and all type of weird cases, and not just like the very happy path of we don't have anything, let's go ahead and just generate the test case.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues I think with migrating from Selenium, and I know that's not the topic of our discussion today, but one of the biggest issues that I've always had has been just the framework, right? Because the Selenium framework is built however the guy wants to build it. It's not a standard framework. It's however the guy wants to do it. If he's having tables that run Selenium, his Selenium software, if he's having this job or this job coded in whatever to clean up his automation and things like that, that framework it's not the library as much. It's that framework aspect because, that guy, like, how does he clean up his test now, right? Or how does he migrate away from that? So
I agree. And
that's
Playwright
all.
cleans a lot of these things up, and it's also it was written in the last year, so it just fits better for modern development.
Yeah, that's always been the hard part about that migration though, is that framework aspect.
Yeah.
So, well, cool, man. So I'm interested to know, Checksum's a pretty neat product and a pretty neat tool set. And I am interested to know, how do you guys, the AI space is so big and there's so many solutions and so much going on, and solutions that are great for a small startup sometimes aren't so hot for a big enterprise. Enterprises are complex. I know enterprises that still have COBOL and mainframes and desktops and web applications and mobile applications and services and just all this hodgepodge of stuff. And so it's interesting when you think of AI in an enterprise setting. They probably, a cursor is probably applicable. Replit is probably applicable in some situations. It's interesting to me, like how a AI focused product company, really chooses what to focus on giving a solution out, right? So a requirements to test cases, that's a great solution uh, that you have, and that's a I try to think of a user's journey, right? And they're creating requirements, and they're making test cases, and even in a big enterprise, banks have to have test cases, insurance, highly regulatory places have to have test cases. uh, so those are still popular. Those are still a thing that you have to have. How do y'all figure out what that roadmap looks like for y'all and what to focus on next? Are you engaging with your clients to do that? Is it a little bit of engaging,
No, that's a great question. So first
guessing?
of all, when we started, we really started Checksum to solve our own problems. So Checksum was started before ChatGPT was launched. So it's not like we've seen AI and what it can do and reverse engineer our way to some problem and solution.
Yeah,
Um, we always used transformers, but our first versions weren't even large language models. So we just had seen this problem again and again and again, where your engineering team at a certain point it becomes big. Maybe it's Series B, maybe it's Series C, maybe it's even enterprise, and it becomes very hard to make changes in your application, in your code base, and be 100% sure that you didn't break something else, right? Because it's all dependencies on dependencies on dependencies, and you change one thing, you don't realize that you caused the ripple effect that like 5 features later will just break something that's completely unrelated, at least like in a direct way.
yeah,
And the way to solve it is, and the way it manifests is just your engineers spend 50% of their time on firefighting. So you plan a sprint, day after there's like breakage in production or in staging, and everyone needs to drop what they're working on and just fix those bugs. Um, and the way to solve it is typically end-to-end test, because when you have at least a very straightforward, like high impact testing suite that gives you immediate feedback on what's working and what's not, you're able to detect all of the issues before you even make the PR or right after you make the PR, just solve them on the spot, finish the task and move on. So instead of doing this dance of you finish with the task, you move on to something else, you realize you created a bug, you go back to the task, you move on to the next thing, you realize you created another bug, go back to the task. This back and forth between, going back, fixing, working on the new thing, going back, fixing, working on the new thing, back and forth between QA and engineers, etc., etc. You just have all of the feedback, you fix it, you move on. So it came from a really real world problem, but obviously the problem with end-to-end tests, it takes a very long time to write and maintain. It's not just writing them, like the maintenance. It's like any software project. It's a project. It's a project that you need to maintain forever. And so we were very focused from day one on how do we solve this very specific problem. And luckily with end-to-end test, because it depends on your front end, your back end, your database, like it depends on a lot of stuff, not just on your code base.
yep,
And we haven't seen, and I don't believe we'll see in the future, off the shelf solutions, which are amazing. We use Cursor, Repelity is great, but we haven't seen off the shelf solutions able to actually solve the end-to-end testing problem, I think you need a dedicated end-to-end test solution.
Yeah. So when you talk about that, so are you focusing on test data generation through AI? And
To an
maybe
extent,
go ahead. I'm
to an
sorry.
extent, it's not our, like the main focus is to actually write the playwright scripts as well as the data setup, data cleanup as part of the tests. So to an extent, we do need to set up the data, but obviously, so we work both with startups, which is more straightforward, and large enterprises, which typically have their own test harness and ability to spin up C data and a testing environment. So we can hook up. The advantage of us using Playwright and our model generating code is that we can hook up to existing infrastructure and basically leverage that in the test case detection, generation, and then maintenance.
So, what's your opinion of a autonomous world? Like, I have this beautiful vision someday, and I can't tell you when it's magically going to happen, but someday we would have an autonomous SDLC. You might have a product manager that's sort of tweaking the product a little bit, and then they may have like a BA that sort of defines what they want and then sort of validates what the product manager's vision is implemented right. But that's about, I have this hope that someday we could get to that state. And I see it happening. I mean, it's already happened in web to some degree. You could go to Wix.com today, stand up a beautiful website, integrate it with the ecom and all that kind of stuff. One person can do that, right? Back in what 2000, that was a whole team that it took to do that. So I understand enterprise is complex and our IT departments are complex. But what's your view of an autonomous SDLC? Do you think we'll ever get to a point where we'll be at that state, or do you think it's a mixed bag for the next 20 years, or what do you think?
I think it's very similar to autonomous driving. Maybe that's a good analogy, where getting to a point where you can run experiments with drive cars driving completely autonomous happened very fast. But actually getting a fully autonomous car is a very very long tail of like problem solving, and we've been hearing about autonomous cars coming in the market for the past 20 years, right? Every
Yeah.
year they say next year we're going to have autonomous cars. So I think it's the same way, where we're at the point right now where 80% of the road took 20% of the time, but now completing it to fully autonomous will take a very very long time. But with that being said, there's still a lot of value to create. So even if you continue with this autonomous car analogy, like Tesla works great, right? Like you still need your hands on the wheel, but it's able to navigate. It reduces stress. Like it's a very cool product. So I think in that case, like great, now you have tools like Cursor or Repel It, where you can actually, okay, maybe it doesn't fully build the product, but it makes a software engineer 5x more efficient. And
Yeah.
Checksum is maybe more like um, Waymo in this case. So Waymo takes you from A to Z completely autonomous. You just click on a button, you get a car, but it doesn't do everything, right? So that's why Checksum is very focused on end-to-end tests. Um, and we are thinking about ourselves, and I think many companies will start doing that as a result. As a service company, like we're going to deliver to you an end-to-end testing suite. That's our goal. Checksum is not as much as a product you use daily, but more of an AI agent that just delivers code for you. And when we deliver code, we deliver it on GitHub or GitLab via pull request. So we're very hooked into like your existing tools. And so you can barely interface with like a Checksum UI. It's mainly Checksum does stuff as if you had another developer on the team. And so I think Checksum in this sense is very similar to Waymo. And I think software engineering and generally processes, businesses, processes with AI will take the same route. You'll see very wide tools that require people, but it still makes you 3x more efficient, and very narrow tools that automate the entire thing. Um, but it's like a very narrow and focused use case. Like Checksum end-to-end tests, we only do web, and we mainly focus on Playwright, and that's it, right? We're very focused.
Yeah. What do you think we're missing from an AI perspective in the end-to-end space? Do we have the CI/CD down well? Do we have mobile uh, down where we could be pretty seamless with mobile? I mean, mobile was kind of a an issue for a long time. But what do you think our weak spots are? Uh,
Are you asking from testing or generally?
Testing in format with those aspects added to, right? So testing with CI/CD, testing with mobile, right?
Yeah, so again, Checksum solves pretty automatically the web component of it.
Yeah.
We still need, so we kind of build our own models. We train on data, so we have setup that we need to do per customer in order to make sure the accuracy is correct before we can unleash the model. But
Yep.
that's all done on Checksum side. But web is pretty automatic today with Checksum. Like our customers spend maybe an hour a week and get a full testing suite. And this hour is mainly review the results that the tests we've generated, and when a test fails, figure out why it failed and actually fix the bug. So maybe an hour a week. So that's pretty automatic. I don't think the CI/CD it's just a way of running the test. I don't think that mobile is caught up completely, but that's mobile is a bit harder because of the devices and the different operating systems.
Yeah. Do you see a future for manual testing in that environment?
Yeah, I actually see a future for manual testing in a sense more than automated testing, because I think what could be automated will be automated by AI, and you'll always need QA automation engineers, but you'll just need one QA automation engineer will be able to serve more a bigger slice of the pie. Um, and again, with Checksum, a lot of companies we work with engineers directly, because if it's an hour a week, then you might as well just have engineers do it. So it really depends. But um, manual testing has requires manual testing, not like regression, like let's do a checklist, but actually understanding the different customers and the different edge cases. And there are apps with thousands of configurations, so you can't automate everything. So understanding what is the highest risk for this release and having an automated testing suite that gives you peace of mind, make sure the core functionality is working. So 95% of your users or 99% of your users will not break. But automating the 1% of users that have those weird configs is going to be very hard, because again, you're going to need hundreds of thousands of tests. And this is where manual actually going to be important, because, or still is important in the same way it is important today, because okay, we release this feature and that feature, and I know this customer has some weird issues with this feature and they use it in a weird way. So let me just do a manual regression suite for this new feature we released in this weird way, which we're not going to automate because it's like one customer out of 1,000, and it's only when we touch this feature. So I think manual has still in a similar way, it still has a place today. I don't think AI will replace it, because it requires a lot of context and a lot of it requires breathing your customers and your engineering team. But I think QA automation it's easier to see how it's going to be, or Checksum is to an extent already automated, but it's easier to see how if you just write code, machines can do it.
I got you. So you mentioned checksum really kind of started, or maybe you got the idea for checksum uh, when LLMs ChatGPT came out. Uh, do you integrate just with? Do you use ChatGPT on the back end, or do you integrate with Anthropic, or is that user defined, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so we started Checksum before those things were
Oh,
launched, and we actually had our
okay,
own
sorry.
models which we trained, by the way. And till today, Checksum is a hybrid between models we deploy and train and use to some tasks that off the shelf APIs will work well. So we always try to pick and choose the best model, because end-to-end tests need to be very fast, need to be very reliable, and they need to know the specific application. Yeah, so they're very specific. So this is why we need to use hybrid. Whatever we can upload to OpenAI and Anthropic and Google, we do, but it's not the bulk majority of the AI usage at Checkpoint.
I was also wondering, just what you think the future. Do you think there's a future for open source testing? Now, why I say that is because I see the tools just getting better and better, right? There, Playwrights, and there's a number of test product companies out there built on Playwright. And then there's, Selenium is still great, but it seems like the products are getting really really strong, and they're built on open source. Do you see a big future for open source? Do you see that still living
Yeah,
at the same time?
it's a good question. Like, obviously, open source will always be, to an extent, the infrastructure of like everything we do in technology, right? Like,
Right.
our servers will still run Linux, and it's going to be continue to be maintained. And I'm sure the next Linux or the next infrastructure open source project will continue to exist that maybe hasn't been invented yet. And then people still use Docker to containerize applications. And again, the next thing will be invented and will be used. And Playwright is one
Yeah.
example. And but I think especially with AI, the app layer is extremely important. Like, productizing those models and allowing productizing those models in a way that allows customers to actually complete full workflow and gain like full advantage of those models beyond just, hey, give me some piece of code here, piece of code there, and save you a few minutes. I think the app
Yeah.
layer and the connections between everything is going to be super important. um, and again, to an extent, with Checksum, where we focus on end-to-end tests, we can see how you can kind of drive results.
Yeah, the reasons for open source used to be, well, test products are really expensive. That's not really the case anymore. It also used to be our integrations are pretty in depth, and I can never find a test product that can facilitate our integrations really. And the integrations these days are pretty commonplace. It's not like it was 6 years ago or 7 years ago, even. And those were big reasons. And yes, this open source started out with the free. We want it because it's free, but we're not talking about every tool these days is $25,000 a license, right? So tools are more competitively priced these days, and open source doesn't inherently give you things like AI solutions that are just have a huge return on investment, right? So when you compare that plus the infrastructure and the support structure that you get, uh, I don't know, man. I get a little nervous about the
I
open
understand
source
your question.
future.
I understand your question better now. No, I think open source will continue to be the main channel,
Yeah,
specifically for testing. Obviously, at Checksum, we took a bet on open source, right? So we very deliberately provide code and provide playwright tests versus provide a platform and tests that are like displayed in no code fashion to actually run it. So very deliberately we provided no open source, because from our experience on talking to prospects at the beginning and working with our customers, we see a lot of importance of using open source specifically for testing. The testing suite is as strong as the engineers on the team connected to the results. And if your tests sit within your code base and are run within your GitHub Actions, and you can see exactly the code that's been run, and you can quickly make changes with code with the tools you already know, that's the most important thing. If you have some platforms that none of the engineers ever go to, and they need permissions, and they don't even have permissions, and they don't know how to use it, and then don't know how to review the reports, that's where we lost them. So specifically for testing, I think open source is extremely important, and again, we made a very deliberate decision.
yeah,
But at the same time, I think the tools that are winning in the market today are the tools that allow you to write code and actually make things happen. And I don't see a shift towards no code generally in like software development because of AI. So I think the trend will be tools that allow you to leverage open source frameworks and tools like we've been doing today in order to get what you want to get in
yeah.
end-to-end.
Okay. So let's go back to Checksum a little bit. And how you're integrating AI, and how are you? How did you make that product and come up with that product, and how do you deal with things like hallucinations and aspects of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we found most useful is, instead of creating one large model that tries to do everything, we think about Checksum as a system of small models. Each has a very specific task and each solves a very specific problem. So we have a model with the goal of summarizing the HTML and basically providing an HTML summary, because HTMLs today are huge and you can't fit all of them. Even if you can, it creates issues when you fit the entire HTML.
Mhm.
We have a model whose goal is to decide what next action to take. We have a model whose goal is to generate the best locator. We have a model or selector. We have a model whose goal is to generate the best assertions. So basically, we just have a series of very small models with very specific tasks. Some of them are internally trained, some of them use external APIs, but this allows us to keep hallucinations to a minimum. It allows us to generate tests with a cost-efficient manner, and it allows us to make fast decisions that are more constructed. And also, when something fails, it allows us to kind of break it down. So yeah, take a big problem, break it into small steps, and build a system of small models or small decision-making capabilities versus dumping everything into an LLM and hope you get a correct answer.
So I've got another one for you, and it's something that I've seen a lot of is SaaS companies that are giving AI solutions and things that require LLM integration. How do SaaS companies deal with that in a regulated environment where privacy is like a big issue?
That's a wonderful question. It's hard. It's privacy, and also companies, even if the data is not consumer private,
Mhm.
companies today are really worried that large language models will be trained on their data, even if it's not consumer data,
Yeah.
just because they feel like they're missing something out. Whether this feeling is correct or not, and whether you should care if someone trains on your data, I don't know. But yeah, it's a big problem. With Checksum, luckily, we've architected our entire system to not collect PII, so we don't collect any personal identifier information. And the data that Checksum exposed to is mainly front-end, how your front-end application looks like, which every customer of our customers have access to the web app. You build front-ends for people to use. So we don't need access to the specific code base. We don't need access to the backend systems, to the database. We don't need access to PII or specific consumer data. So we architected it in this way. But as we do this, we see that companies really care about it. And I think we'll need to, there will need to create some standards as to what can you share, what can you share, can't you share, and companies need to make a decision about how much they're willing to give in order to gain AI efficiencies. Because Checksum was able to do it with very little data, but some use cases you can't just do if you're not willing to give data to an AI model. And I'm assuming as AI models become better and you can 5x your revenue if you just use AI, I think I will see companies more willing to put data inside of AI. So it's more of a reward structure function.
So do you help them sanitize that data, or do you make them aware that that data needs to be sanitized? Like if it's a social security number or a phone number or anything really, last name, addresses, and stuff
Both.
like that.
So we don't work on real customer data, right? We generate tests in a UAT environment. We log in as fake users. So we try to never touch customer data, and we have sanitization mechanisms in place we can activate in case there are environments that are more hybrid and it's hard to. Typically, we just do the clear separation, but if we can't, we have checks and balances in place that make sure there isn't any social security numbers or emails being sent or any PII.
Where do you see Checksum in the next 24 months?
Yeah,
Smaller clients, enterprise clients?
if I'll tell you I know where Checksum will be in 24 months, I'll probably be lying. And we're hyper focused on. We have a product that works really really well. We grow very fast, so we're hyper focused on solving the correct problem at hand. What we do know is where do we want to be in 10 years and where do we want to be in the next month, and everything in between, or in the next 3 months, and everything in between we kind of figure it out as we go. But generally speaking, as we move towards more autonomous systems, and specifically for engineering, more autonomous AI engineers, we believe that there is no autonomous AI engineer without autonomous QA automation engineer.
Yeah.
Because if AI is going to write more code, this code is going to be lower quality, and more code will be written. So if you want AI to fully autonomously write code, you need a way to test this code very robustly, and you need a way to test this code across systems, because AI is very good at figuring unit level code. It's still not good at like understanding a full code base all at once exactly how it works.
Yeah.
And so our vision in the next, I don't know if 2 years, but in the next 5 or 10 years, is to play a significant role in building autonomous AI engineering systems by providing the testing part and the feedback part that will be then fed back to the AI model in an iteration loop. So I'm imagining an AI engineer model will write some code, Checksum will test it, provide all of the failures to the AI model, the AI model fix and so on. And in a sense, that's what we're doing today. Just behind the scenes, it's not an AI engineer. It's a person who's maybe using AI to write code, but the immediate feedback of everything that's working is like the most powerful thing about Checksum and end-to-end testing suite in general. And I think this feedback will be necessary to push the envelope. So that's the role we want to play in the overall grand scheme of things.
You mentioned reporting a little bit or giving feedback, which I consider reporting. I can tell you as an engineering manager for 20 years. This is going to sound kind of weird, but one of the most important things to me was to have like a dashboard or a viewpoint into how well my release was doing and the health of my release. When I got to, 2 days before release, I need to really be able to manage a lot of things. Other people's expectations, right? Everybody in the business and our clients and just a lot going on. Does Checksum have that ability to be able to pull all of that together and give kind of on the execution side for them to be able to say, hey, we're ready to go or no go kind of a status?
Yes. And today we focus very much on the engineering standpoint, like is your app functionally correct? But on our roadmap is definitely bringing on different stakeholders and different data points to be a central decision making center for whether you can deploy release. And testing and whether your app is working is the main part of it, but we can definitely do more in it, because we already for somewhat connected to the new features, everything that changed in the release, right? Because we run in the test, so we can start publishing changes and informing customers or informing product managers or informing the company. So we do have a lot of data that we understand of what changed in
Yeah.
the release and what happened, and we can definitely operationalize it. But as a relatively young startup, we're very focused on end-to-end tests, and we also see a strong pull from the market, so we don't see any reason to diverge too much at this point, because we feel like there's still a lot we can do to satisfy the core use case of I want to know that my app is working, and if it's not working, I want to get it fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those cool things that happens when you become an end-to-end automation product company is that you start collecting a lot of data and you start realizing, man, look at all the insights that I could give if I repackaged a lot of this data. Like you could make improvements to your test processes if you tweak this or you tweak that, right? Or you found 5 bugs last time, but you found it in this section of code. So this section of code is higher risk than the other areas or whatever. That's always been kind of a thing, right? I as a manager, I would always go back and do kind of that retrospective and how do we get better, you know? I could see as a product maker, I would love to be able to have that kind of data and to be able to push that back into an informed decision later.
100%. We call it internally continuous quality. So there's
Yeah.
continuous integration, continuous deployment, and the checksum we want to play a part in continuous quality. Basically, at every point, give you the insights and give you the tools and the information you need in order to increase the quality of your product. Again, end-to-end test is just a start where like, are things working? But if there are bugs, we can then tell you in the future, why do bugs happen? Which modules do bug happen the most? Maybe you can refactor these modules. Maybe you can do something about it so it's bugs don't happen in the first place. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and we kind of um, try to look far, but also focus on the near.
So I've got one other, I guess, area that's kind of really been on my mind a lot lately is, and it's not really, I guess it is product specific in a really in a way, but it goes back to funding. When you're a startup and you're going through the funding process and you're looking for investors, um, what are you seeing that they are looking at or that they are interested in these days? Is it just anything that you're throwing at them with AI in it, or is it the specific aspects of that? What do you think is? Do you think there VCs and the private equity companies out there are really interested in these days and really sort of turns them on?
Yeah, and I think first of all, no, it's not everything you throw AI. I think people tend to give not enough credit to investors that are, of course, they're smart people and they want to also make sure there's actually a strong business behind it. But AI did change a lot of things, and I do see investors and maybe even more generally people take things into different ways, right? There are investors who think that building software and building UI elements will be commoditized.
Yeah.
So advantages you used to have if you built a CRM, right? You could have advantage and great business if you built in CRM. I see a lot of investors say that now it's very easy to copy features. So, application and UI and user experience is no longer the advantage. I don't know if I subscribe to it, but I do hear people say that, and they only focused on like deep tech that cannot be copied quickly. And some even go further where they think every company in the future will build their own CRM according to exactly their specifications because it's going to be so easy. And if the other investors is just focused very much on speed, which same kind of insight, but different outcome is like, yeah, so now if you just move faster and you understand your customers best, you win because copy software is easy. So actually they focus on like the best team and the team that moves faster and have the most insights. And so yeah, I don't think it's as uniform today because of the latest changes, and it will probably converge at a certain point to some thesis that controls the market.
Do you think liquidity is opening up again in the market, or is that still pretty tight?
Yeah, I don't think I'm the right person to ask. We know about us. We're doing well. We haven't like we I have a sample size of one, so I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this question. Probably you need like the investor side to tell you if what they're seeing, if they're seeing a higher volume.
I mean, I talked to a lot of boards. I've talked to probably about 6 different test product boards. I don't know. I've seen it a little bit all over the place, to be honest. And the money's there. It's just a little tighter. One thing I have seen is that, they ask. I think it's interesting how much they ask. They ask a lot of questions a lot of times because they aren't the expert in the tech. So interesting stuff, Gal. I was just wondering what your insight was.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an interesting period. I think tech is changing very very fast, and AI will definitely tech will be the first thing that is going to change it completely because of AI, and I think other industries will also have.
Can we expect to see Checksum at any conferences, any test conferences, or anything like that this year?
Yeah, definitely. We are moving very fast. So I can tell you we have the calendar for 2025 and here's all of the things we're going to attend. But
Yes,
on a
sir.
month to month basis is definitely on our roadmap. We want to engage more with the community at scale, and conferences is a great way to do it.
Yeah. Is that your approach? More meetups, more local events, or more conferences, or a little bit mix of both?
It's a mix. We also
Yeah.
see we have now we've made enough name. I don't know if 90% of the people know us, but we know enough name for ourselves. We made a good enough name for ourselves that we get good stream of inbounds, and people are just hearing word to mouth or kind of becomes familiar with Checksum and they find us. But obviously, again, we want to engage with the community in a broader scale. So conferences are a good way to go about it.
Yeah, to get your name out a little bit, right? I
Yeah,
understand
exactly.
that. So, I know who you are. And you're a innovative test product company. You're also from Israel. I think that's awesome. I'm so impressed with Israeli companies. One of my first jobs was doing development work and testing work with a company called Amdocs, which is an Israeli telecom billing company. And it's so amazing to see such awesome stuff come out of such a small country, that you would never think that just the innovation that's able to come out of Israel is just unbelievable. So
100% agree, and I think there's a few reasons to it, but yeah, it's
what
pretty.
are your reasons for it? Why are y'all so? It's like a little San Francisco over there or something.
Yeah, I think just to correct you, which I don't know if it matters, but so I sit in San Francisco, I sit in California. Our engineering team is in Israel. So we have a team in California, our engineering team is in Israel, and overall we're a US company with a big Israeli presence. And obviously I sit in California, but I'm from Israel. Why I think Israel is a relatively new country. It was established on similar values to the US from the sense of like pioneering, right? And this was very recently. So I think the entrepreneurial culture is very prominent in Israel because it's kind of used to like 70 years ago when Israel was founded. People just do stuff to make things happen, and that's very aligned with startups. But and also again the culture, I know in a lot of cultures, when I used to be at Google, I left to co-found a startup. When you do that in other cultures, like your parents is like, why? Right? Like why would you take you would a perfectly good job making good money and like cut your salary in more than half and to start a business that's unstable. And I think like in Israel culture, or at least my parents are like, yeah, great, like that's very ambitious, that's amazing. So I think those things kind of like get people to try more.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's amazing to see. Could give endless examples of software companies that have done really well. So congratulations on all you've done so far. I'm refreshing my website to see what you come out with and what you continue to come up with every day. So thanks, Gal.
Thanks, and thanks for your time, and it was a lovely conversation.
Hey, this is Mike. Thanks for watching part 2 of our series, Autonomous SDLC, a test product perspective. If you want to go back and check part 1, which was Autonomous SDLC, developer's perspective, feel free to look that up in our channel. I do expect to do a part 3 to this sometime within the next month. So welcome to check that out as well. Special thanks to Gal and the ChecksumAI team for taking their time to talk with us. Links to Checksum is in the description below. They're a great product and it's a great team over there. It's a lot of energy. It's a good company. All right. Thanks, guys.